In section 5, we're going to be dealing with formulas and problem solving. So in these first 4 examples, we're going to take, let's say, the distance formula, and then we're going to substitute the known values, a 9 for the t, 63 for the distance, and we don't know the r. So how would you solve for r? Well, in a sense, the 9 is the numerical coefficient, so we divide both sides by 9, and then we get r equals 7. Now, another very useful formula is the perimeter formula, where we have P equals 2 L's plus 2 W's. Now again, we know some stuff. We know perimeter is 32. We know our width is 7. What we don't know is what the L is. So the strategy for these, write the example down, substitute, and now solve. So 32 equals 2L plus 14. We're now going to subtract 14 from both sides and get 18 equals 2L. We're going to divide both sides by 2 now. L equals 9. Now you might say, I didn't show the division. Again, as we progress, as long as you know what you're doing, you don't need to show every single step. All right, let's go on to number or letter C, which is the volume formula. Volume equals 1/3 capital B and H. Now in MATLAB, be careful you don't substitute lowercase b, and we do some substitution. So our volume is 40. 1/3. We don't know our B, and H is 8. Now, in looking at our strategy here, you might say, what do we do? Well, again, we said that when we have an equation with fractions in it, get rid of the fractions. Now, there's only one term on this side and one term on this side, so our common denominator is 3. So we multiply this side by 3 and this by 3. Here the 3's cancel out, and we get 120 equals B 8. And how do we isolate the 8? Or I should say the B. How do we get rid of the 8? We divide both sides by 8. And B equals 15. So a very good strategy. When you have a fraction, get rid of the fractions by the technique we've used before. Now for simple interest, interest equals the principal times the rate times the time. Now they're giving us the interest is 23. The principal is 230. The rate is 0.02, and we don't know the time. So what do? Well, we can do this multiplication, and this comes out to 4.6 t. Now, how do we find t? Well, we divide both sides by 4.6. And we get t equals 5. So once again, in something like this, you're just going to take your formula, carefully substitute, and find for the unknown letter. In letter E, we're using the formula F for Fahrenheit equals 9/5 your Celsius plus 32, and we're saying our Fahrenheit temperature is 102. So where I have the F, to save a little room, I'll put the 102 there. Now, in solving something like this, I could multiply everything by 5, but I could choose also to get rid of my 32 first by subtracting 32 from both sides. Or I could just transpose. So this gives me then 70 equals 9/5 C. And I chose to do it this way because when I see I have a fraction with the Celsius, I can just use that other tool, the reciprocal, to make this a 1C. So here, these just all cancel out and become a 1. And I'll do it down here. And I get C then. Now I multiply 5 times 70 in my calculator, and then divide it by 9. And I get 38.8. And the 8's repeat. So they're asked in the example to round to the nearest whole, so to a single decimal point, or the nearest tenth. Since these are all 8s, this will become a 38.9 as a final answer degrees. Now in MATLAB, be careful of this. Follow the instructions carefully. On your blue sheet, I would be able to give you partial credit. You got the exact answer. You just made an error in rounding off. I'd like to give you the full credit, so be careful when you read that. Let's go on. In letter F, we're going to read the example carefully. Decided the fence for the dog. The length of the area is 1 meter less than twice the width. If this is the perimeter, find the length and width. Well, here I think it would be important to make a figure, a diagram. So the length of the area is 1 meter less than twice the width. Well, you don't know what the width is, so we're going to call the width W. Now, what's the length? Well, it's twice the width minus 1. Now again, read this over and see if it makes sense. So now we're going to use our perimeter formula. I'll put it up here. Now we substitute. We know our perimeter is 70. Now we need 2 times the lengths. Well, what are the lengths? Well, it's 2w minus 1. And we have 2 widths. So there's our formula. So 70, clearing parentheses, 4w minus 2 plus 2w, group like terms, 6w. I'm going to transpose this 2, makes this 72. Going to divide both sides by 6. So I get my W is 12. Now they want to know all the measurements. So if W is 12, our length is 2 times 12, 24, minus 1, 23. So these are the dimensions. 12 for the width, 23. And how did I find it? I knew I had to use the perimeter formula. I had to figure out what could I use for the width, and then the width in the length in terms of the width right from this reading. A modification of substituting parts into a formula is to just solve for the letter. They want to know what B is. And in this formula, so there's the B right there. So what would you do as fractions? You said get rid of the fractions by multiplying both sides by 2. That is correct. So you then get 2a equals BH. And how do you get the B by itself? Well, you just divide out the H. So B equals 2a over H. Now here's where transposition comes in very well. You want to solve for this letter. So what I'd do is I'd put the P there. I'm going to transpose this one to the other side as a negative S sub 1. Transpose this to the other side as a negative S sub 2. And that equals S sub 3. Again, the technique of transposition, just take a term from one side, move it to the other, and change its sign. All right, here we want to solve for the letter L, which is right in there. So, again, the first step would be to transpose this to the other side, and it just becomes a negative 2WH equals 4LW. Now, how do we get rid of what we don't want? We divide it out. So we want the L, so we're going to divide by 4W. And put a division bar on this side for W. So here the 4's cancel out, the W's cancel out, and we have L equals this. And they give us a nice easy one for our last example. We want to solve for R. So we just divide out what we don't want. We don't want the 2 and we don't want the pi. So the 2 cancels out, the pi cancel out, and we have r equals c over 2 pi. Now, as you do your practice, again, you want to develop your skill that will lead to mastery of how to work equations. And again, we've taken this in very small pieces. At my other school, we do equations, all of chapter 2 in just one lesson. So you guys have a really good basis on what's needed to hopefully master this.